Tonight we are on part 8 of our yet to be determined how many part series on words. Words in the Bible that may not mean what most people think they mean. The words we've looked at so far have been very important theologically. I mean, we looked at logos, at the word remember, anamnesis, glory, holy. All these words have implications about how we understand who God is and who Jesus is, and they affect our faith. The word we're going to look at tonight doesn't. It doesn't affect your faith. It doesn't speak to the nature of Jesus. It honestly makes very little difference theologically. But it is a somewhat significant word in the Bible, used only 2 times, and it is a very misunderstood word. And once we look at this word, it's going to change the story we know. Before I do that, and by the way, if you're watching by internet, I really encourage you on your Facebook page or wherever, I encourage you to share these videos so others can perhaps watch them and be enriched by them. I'm going down this momentary rabbit trail before I get into tonight's lesson, and that is there's another subject that is dear to my heart that makes absolutely no difference whatsoever in how we understand Scripture. I've talked about this with clergy. One bishop in Prescott, Arizona, God rest his soul, Bishop George, I was teaching a seminar for him at his church, and we sat out one night on his porch and just were talking Bible, and this subject came up, and I proffered it to him, and he said, well, that makes a lot of sense. And the next morning, we got up for breakfast the next morning, and he said, I couldn't sleep at all last night thinking about what you said. Clearly, that's the case. It can't be anything else. And I said, but George, it doesn't matter. He goes, I know it doesn't matter, but it has to be what you said. And that is the question of who is the disciple whom Jesus loved, mentioned in the Gospel of John several times. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not going to go down that. All I'm saying is what we're looking at tonight is kind of like that, in that it really doesn't matter. It doesn't make a huge difference to our theology or our faith, but it's interesting to dig in and study and grow deeper in the Scripture. So, let us begin. True story. True story. During a Christmas play, and if you grew up in church, you grew up in Christmas plays. I grew up in Evangel Temple Assemblies of God Church in Denison, Texas. My dad was the pastor, and we had a Christmas play every year. And you know, the church was full of just regular Denison folk, not super educated, not big word users. And there's this one fellow that I've known him literally since I was an infant. His name was Jimmy Neff. Big guy, rode a motorcycle, good friends with my uncle, and they chose him for some reason to be Joseph in this play. And the only line that Joseph had was when they go to Bethlehem, the innkeeper says, there's no room, but we have a barn. And Joseph's only line is, it will suffice. But Jimmy had never used the word suffice in his life. The word he used is it'll do. Mm-hmm. And he stands up there as Joseph and says, it will suffice. And coming out of his lips, everybody in the congregation just lost it, just died, because Jimmy would never use that word, and maybe Joseph never would either. So here's a true story. During a church Christmas play, when Mary and Joseph came to the inn looking for a place to stay, the compassionate little boy who played the innkeeper went off script. And instead of saying, we have no room at the inn, he said, you can have my room. and why not? Why not? Why would a culture which is given to hospitality, why wouldn't the innkeeper say, well, oh my Lord, you're highly pregnant. Here, take my room. I'll go sleep out in the shed. Or for that matter, why wouldn't the young couple staying down in room 222, why wouldn't they say, you know what, lady, take our room. We'll be fine. We'll camp out. We've got our sleeping bags in the car. We'll be fine. In other words, why wouldn't someone say, here, take my room? Or why didn't Joseph and Mary, this was his hometown, why didn't Joseph and Mary just head over to Zechariah and Elizabeth's house, you know, a couple of miles out in the countryside? After Jesus is born, why didn't one of the shepherds say, well, this won't do, come to my house? Why not some cousin, some childhood friend, bring them into their home? Why is he born in a barn, in a stable? Are there no options other than stable? But here's the fascinating thing. This text never says a word about innkeeper. We add that to the text. We assume that the text, Luke chapter 2, never says a word about an innkeeper. Luke chapter 2, verse 6. And while they were in Bethlehem, the time came for her to give birth. While they were in Bethlehem, the time came for her to give birth, and she gave birth to her firstborn son and wrapped him in swaddling clothes and laid him in a manger because there was no place for them in the inn. Doesn't say a word about an innkeeper. Doesn't say a word about them saying, we'd like a room. Sorry, we don't have any rooms. But watch this. The Greek word translated in the King James Version, in the New International Version, in the English Standard Version, and pretty much any version you want, the Greek word is kataluma. It's only used one other time in the Bible, and this is also in the Gospel of Luke. Let me jump ahead. Luke chapter 22, Jesus is about to do Passover. He's about to celebrate the Last Supper. Chapter 22, verse 11, he sent some of his disciples into town to make preparations for Passover. And he told them where to go. He told them, go to this certain place, this certain person, and say to the owner of the house, the teacher asks, where is the guest room where I may eat Passover with my disciples? And he will show you a large upper room, all furnished. Make preparations there. And they left and found things just as Jesus had told them. So they prepared the Passover. Guest room. Kataluma. Same word here translated in. Now, I suppose it could mean inn, hotel, because a hotel has rooms for guests. But there's another word in Greek for hotel. Let me run down that rabbit trail just for a minute. It is only used one time, also in the Gospel of Luke, in a story that every one of you are very familiar with. Luke chapter 10, the story of the Good Samaritan. The Good Samaritan finds the man beaten up, barely alive, cut up, dying on the side of the road. He went to him and bound up his wounds, Luke 10:34, pouring on oil and wine. And then he set him on his own animal and brought him to an inn. Pandokion is the word, which is it's not the word we're looking at tonight, so I'm not going to spend much time on it, but pan means all in Greek, and dokion means welcome. So literally this word for hotel, this word for inn, is an all is welcome place. And this is the only time in the New Testament that an innkeeper is mentioned as well. And the next day, he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper, saying, take care of him, and whatever more you spend, I will repay you when I come back. Good Samaritan. Innkeeper, by the way, is a similar word. It means one who welcomes all. If Luke had meant hotel, he would have used this word. He doesn't use this word. Which brings me to the point tonight. Archaeologists have excavated homes from the time of Jesus, and they are very much the same as rural Palestinian Israeli homes today, and very much the same, by the way, as rural Mexican homes. I'm going to try this for you folk watching online. The rest of you have a handout. This may or may not work. I'm going to hold it right here and hope you can see this. If you will look, there is a lower floor. There are steps up to a second floor, which is where the guest room is located. And then there are more steps up to the rooftop where people go and sit in the cool of the evening. So that's a typical home in Jesus' time. Okay, everybody see it? Mm-hmm. I hope that worked for y'all. That upper room on the top of a house, sometimes they were on the side of a house, but typically on the top of a house, is called a kataluma, the word that gets translated inn. Here's what one of those houses look like. And you don't have to go to Israel. Like I said, you can go to Mexico and see the same thing. There is basically one big room on the bottom floor. And it's where life is lived. Over in this corner, you cook supper. Over in this corner, you sleep. Over in that corner, the kids sleep. It's a big open room where everything happens. And then on top of that, with steps leading up to it, is the guest room. Now that's the coolest place. It's the most desirable place. It's where you put your guests when you have guests. But there's one other thing. And they have these in the United States. My West Texas farmers call them a dirt room. My northern Wisconsin farmers call them a mud room. But there's a little room that you walk into before you get into the house. And that's where you take off your dirty clothes, your muddy boots, your coat. That's where you take things off. There's usually nowadays a sink there. You can wash up a little bit before you go into the house. In first century Israel, you walked in, there's the anteroom, the mud room. There's the big room. There's the room on top, the kataluma. Here's the deal. And we know this from archaeological excavations that you can Google and see photos of. In this little dirt room, mud room, they would at night bring in their cow, their goat, whatever animal they had. And it served two purposes. One is it protected the animal from anything that might go wrong in the night. Secondly, that animal puts off heat. And so on a cold night, that animal or those couple of animals end up heating the house a little bit. And lo and behold, in these houses, right on the edge of that dirt room, there are carved out mangers, carved out bowls where hay or feed would be put for the animals. This is not theory. This is not some idea that some modern day theologian or writer came. This is just reality. So how do we read this story? There are two options. I'll give them to you in conclusion. Option one, Mary and Joseph are dirt poor. They head to Bethlehem to register for the census. They find the hotel booked up. The innkeeper turns away this highly pregnant woman and her husband. The other guests don't invite them in. And they have to settle for a barn out back. Option two, Mary and Joseph go to Bethlehem, Joseph's family town. And immediately they make their way to the home of his brother, his cousin, his second cousin, his aunt, his childhood friend. They make their way to the home of someone they know. But because there are other people, other family in town for the census, someone is already up in the Kataluma. There's no room in the guest house. And so the family says, hey, y'all, we'll make this work. Just come on in. You can sleep right here with the rest of us. You won't have much privacy, but just come on in. Your family, make yourself at home. It's what we would say is, look, come on in. The bedrooms are taken, but we'll make a pallet in the living room. Mary and Joseph go in, surrounded by family. And here's the conjectural part. Mary goes into labor, and the ladies there say, men, out. And the men go out and, stand around the cows and the donkeys and smoke a cigarette and tell stories. And the women assist Mary, giving birth to the Messiah, wrap him up in these nice, comfy wrappings, and lay him in a manger in the same cozy room. This is not a picture of destitution, nor is it a picture of inhospitality. This is a picture of a birth surrounded by love and surrounded by family. And the manger is there, and Jesus is there, and the family is there, and the shepherds hear the news from the angel and make haste to Bethlehem, and they come and worship him there. And here is the final thing to think about. Matthew chapter 2, verse 11. The wise men. When they saw the star, they rejoiced exceedingly with great joy. And going into the house, they saw the child with Mary, his mother, and they fell down and worshiped him. Does it matter theologically? Nope, not a bit. Do we maybe need to rewrite some of our Christmas stories? Yeah, maybe. But the next time you read this text, especially come next Christmas, think about this, that it may be a picture, most likely is a picture, I would say definitely is a picture of a birth surrounded by love, not a birth surrounded by inhospitality. And you take that with you, and the next time you get the chance, you show some love and some hospitality, because you never know who you are entertaining unaware. Amen.